Morning, I'm Killer, everyone. I hope this finds you having a good day. I'm actually recording on Tuesday, Lord willing, putting this up on Friday because I'm traveling down to the Portland area for a missions conference. So anyway, had to get this recorded early. And the day I'm recording, it's very sunny out. A bit cold for here, not for some places, but good day overall. Have you ever had a surprise visit from somebody that came at just the right time? If you have, you know what I'm talking about. You weren't anticipating it, but somebody shows up out of the blue, unexpected, and it was just what you needed in the moment. I can remember when my mom was celebrating her 70th birthday, way back in 2003. Um, the whole family was getting together to celebrate her birthday in Pennsylvania, where I grew up. Of course, I live in British Columbia. So, as far as my mom was concerned, I wasn't going to be there. But what she didn't know is that we had secretly flown me in, and I waited outside of my sister's house. I hid, that's where the party was, till my mom came in. And they were all talking with each other. And I even called her on my cell phone to wish her happy birthday, all part of the ruse that we were doing to my mom. And I remember by this point now, I'm standing in my sister's kitchen talking on the phone. My mom is standing actually on the other side of the wall talking on the phone. And she says, "I wish you could be here." And I stepped out into the doorway and I said, "I wish I could be here too, Mom." And she was so shocked and she just dropped the phone. And then she was so excited. It just happened at the right time. That's what our verse is about. Um, we are looking at the final time that Mary shows up in Scripture, and that's in Galatians chapter 4. She herself doesn't show up in person. It's a reference to Mary, and it's always been, I say this way too often. This is one of my favorite verses, but it's just different verses are impactful at different times of year. And I'm going to tell you why I think this one is an important verse that comes to my mind frequently. It simply says this. This is about God sending his son. You can see that in the second line. God sent his son. But when the set time had fully come, or when the time was exactly right, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law. So it's about God sending his son under three conditions. The time had fully come, born of a woman, born under the law. Let's do the last two, and then we'll come back to this one. He did this for the purpose of redeeming those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship to God. That's the end product and hope of Jesus coming to earth. So the second thing, because we're going to do the first thing last, the second thing was he was born of a woman. That's the reference to Mary. Critically important to understand this is a reference to Jesus's humanity. Never before, I don't think, had there been this idea that a creator God who does not have a human body, in order to do what's needed for the human race, would take on a human body. But that's what was needed because Jesus ultimately came to die on a cross, and God himself cannot die. But when God took on human flesh, the Christmas story, now we have the God man. That's who Jesus is, fully God, fully man, born of a woman, now able to feel and experience all the things that you and I feel and experience, and able to fully die as a human being. The God side of him never died. His human body did die as a penalty for sin. So that is critically important. Really important that we fully understand the humanity of Jesus. It's also critically important that we understand that Jesus is God, but that's a separate issue. Born under the law. This was the one that God had set up from all of eternity, that he would ultimately create a race of human beings, the Israelites, that he would make many promises to the whole world through, and that ultimately his Redeemer would come through the people of Israel. He was born under the law. He fulfilled the law perfectly. He's the only one who's ever done God's will perfectly. So those are two conditions, very important. His humanity and that he came through the Jewish people living a full life. But here's the last condition. This is the one that comes to my mind frequently. At just the right time, or at the set time, when the set time had fully come. God had picked this moment in history to happen. It isn't that God was sitting around, looking around, watching, going, hey, things are looking pretty good right now. I think I'll send my son. No, God had this all planned out all along. And God had arranged history to happen so this perfect moment would happen. Why was it perfect? It was perfect in a lot of ways. One, this was the moment where all of the prophecies about the coming Messiah came together in this one spot, in this one moment in time that couldn't have happened other times in other places. So all of God's promises, including, if you look in Daniel, the exact timetable that he gave us, all took place at this perfect moment when Mary gave birth to Jesus. So that's really important. Secondly, if we were to look around at what was going on in the world then, I mean, the Roman Empire was a hated Roman Empire, uh, but it had conquered most of what we call the known world. It hadn't conquered the whole world, but most of the known world, all the way from Europe, all the way through the Middle East into Africa, um, because there was a common ruling government with a common shared language, the getting out of the message of Jesus, this was the perfect time for it to happen. Because from the Roman Empire, it now began to spread to other places in the world, other places in Africa, off to the Far East, eventually coming across the pond into North and South America. But this was the perfect time for God to send his son, not only in terms of all of the prophecies, but also in terms of the political conditions going on in the day at that moment. It's also under these political conditions where we're able to have somebody make a decree that a census has to be taken, which moved Mary and Joseph from the town they were living in to the town of Bethlehem, where God had prophesied. The political situation was just right. It was followed up by more political situations that were just right that, excuse me, sent Mary and Joseph off into Egypt to fulfill prophecies there. I don't know whether they were aware of that. They just know because of Herod, they had to flee the country because he was trying to kill Jesus. And they ended up in Egypt fulfilling God's prophecy there. They came back a couple years later, but had to flee north because of another political ruler who was up to no good. God was using all of these things at just the right time. And so the whole story of Mary and the birth of Jesus is a story, excuse me, it's a story about God's perfect timing. And that encourages my heart that we have a God sitting on the throne who has a perfect timing for everything. And that includes your life and my life as well. God has perfect timing. The funny thing is, God's perfect timing seldom lines up with my idea of what perfect timing is. I often, when I ask God for things, I want the answer now. I want Him to provide right now. I want it all now. And God often has a whole different timetable, or sometimes I think I want to go off and do this thing, but God actually wants me to go off and do that thing because that's his perfect timing for doing those things. It brings me encouragement in my heart that when I'm in those situations to know that while I might want things a little different, I serve a God who knows all things, can do all things, but also has a perfect timing for all things. So that's our kind of our final lesson in the story of Mary. We're going to return to small things, Lord willing, next week. But this was the final reference that I can find in Scripture. There may be one in Revelation. I'm not sure. But this is kind of the final reference to Mary in the Scriptures. And then the Scriptures will kind of go silent about Mary after this. So I hope this encourages your heart. I hope you have a good weekend and look forward to seeing you all on Monday.